Call to order. Welcome to the February 18th, 2025 City Council meeting. I hereby call the meeting to order. Members of the public may attend the City Council meeting in person or may watch it remotely by viewing the meetings on Channel 8 WCTV and at the city's website at wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person, at the meeting, in advance, or by logging into the Teams call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you will be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel and online. You will be asked to unmute and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. Second item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could ask you to stand if you're able and follow along. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on the agenda is roll call. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. And I will note earlier this evening, the council participated in a workshop and reviewed and discussed the following: discussion of a draft of a neighborhood engagement initiative, presentation by the leads of our boards and commissions, annual reports and work plan, inclusive of the Energy and Environment Committee, Parks and Trails, Heritage Preservation Boards, Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and the Panaway District Committee. And then the last item on our workshop earlier tonight was discussion of the proposed local sales tax use and engagement plan. With that, we're going to approve the agenda. So may I have a motion to approve the agenda as is, or would anyone like to make changes?
Move to approve the agenda as is, Mayor.
It's misbehaving. Anyone have a second?
Second that motion.
Yeah. So we moved and seconded. Do we have any further comments on it? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So the next item on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight is approval of city council workshop and regular.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think public forums before.
Oh, did I miss one? Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that correction. The next item is the public forum. Do we have anybody online or cards for the public forum?
Mr. Mayor, we do not, other than the special guests on the agenda.
Okay, so why don't we do this, just because of how this is going to go. Let's do consent agenda first, and then we'll have our two presenters in the public forum, and then we'll move on to our regular agenda. Well, it does, because we're going to do the consent agenda, then we're going to have a public forum, you're going to pull an item from the consent agenda, and then we'll have it on new business. So next item I'd like to take is approval of the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is approval of the city council workshop and regular meeting minutes from the 28th of January, approval of the check register, approval of the municipal licenses, receipt of the police activity report, receipt of the building activity report, authorization to solicit bids for the 25 mill and overlay and water main loop project, authorization to solicit bids for the 2025 sanitary sewer line project, adoption of resolution 0425, accepting a donation from the Wayzata Conservancy for the Panaway project, and approval of an amendment to the 2025 legislative priorities questions discussed. So take a motion for approving the consent agenda or amending it.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull item I, approval of amendment to 2025 legislative priorities for a separate discussion and vote.
Sure, that would be fine. So with the adjustment, I would take a motion for the consent agenda, having that item pulled to the new business portion of our meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Next, I'd like to come back to public forum. We have two people, or two individuals and representative of two entities for the public forum. As a reminder, when you come to the podium, please state your name, address, and indicating if you're presenting to a group. And if the item you wish to speak about is on the agenda, fill out a form at the table. For those who are watching on Teams, you can send a note to staff if you want to talk about the one item on our agenda. So to proceed with our public forum, we're going to have an update from the Wayzata Lions on charitable and gaming contributions throughout the city. I'd just like to offer a couple comments about the Lions, and then we can take it away. So the Lions Club is actually the world's largest service club organization with over 1.4 million members in approximately 46,000 clubs in more than 200 countries and areas around the world. The local chapter was established here in Wayzata in 1952. Things that they focus on for our community are the pull tabs and proceeds from the pull tabs, which I think we're going to talk about tonight, numerous grants in support of charities, Wayzata High School scholarships. They have an eyeglass collection program with 19 sites in our community that pull in over 1,000 glasses a year. They have an annual waffle breakfast, which I believe is coming up very soon on Saturday, February 22nd. I'm sure they'll be talking about that at St. Bart's Church. They are volunteers extraordinaire. They volunteer at James J. Hill Days, IOCP, Feed My Starving Children, Semi-Annual 101 Highway Cleanup, American Diabetes Bike Tour, Tour de Tonka, Salvation Army Bill Ringing, Holiday Nut Sale, organized the Letters to Santa at the Light Up the Lake celebration. So with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager, and then they'll introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that. Helpful context because it's easy to forget all the great things the Lions do in this community and beyond. So I'd like to call up Tim Anderson and Nancy Nelson McIntosh of the Lions. I asked both Tim, Nancy, and then representatives from the Legion to come tonight to not only promote and give an update of all the great things they're doing for the community, but also give an update on how the last year went. This is the first full year after charitable gambling pull tabs was approved in another location. So getting an update from them and also an opportunity to share with the community all the great things that they're doing around the area. So with that, I would ask Ms. Nelson McIntosh and Mr. Anderson to come up, and they've got a little bit of information to share with you tonight.
Welcome.
Are you sure? All right. So I'm Nancy Nelson McIntosh, and I'm the gambling manager for the Wayzata Lions. My address, you need it, 1201 Edlin Place, Minneapolis, so I'm kind of an outsider, although I've been intimately acquainted with Wayzata for a long time, as my my dad was involved for many years. So I think what I'd like to do, if this is okay, Tim will talk about some of the donations and some of the things that places we've donated to and activities, and I'll give you some of the financials. Having said that, we operate on a June 30th fiscal year end, so as I was parsing all the numbers, trying to, giving you a 2024 number was a little, not challenging, but it's just not the entire picture. So if I can tell you a little bit about our current fiscal year, which is 25, we just completed 7 months, and our total gross revenue was $2,916,446. Our net receipts, so that's the gross is, gambling accounting is kind of different than normal humans do, but so they'll take the gross receipts, subtract out the prizes, and then our net receipts, which then go to expenses and things, but it's $355,598. Compare that to a year before, the same 7 months, so I tried to make it equal. Our total gross revenue was $2,378,351. So a nice increase, and our net receipts were $303,352. That whole the prizes redeemed is kind of it's an interesting number, and it changes from time to time, or month to month, I should say. So our calendar year 2024, our revenue was $4,815,935. So it was a nice year in terms of revenue. Our fiscal year revenues for the last, for the year prior were a little over $4 million, and the same for the year before, but they've been increasing. So it's really been, it's, the trajectory is right in our estimation. The donations, our estimated donations to Wayzata, and so we have there are kind of three buckets. There's the fire relief contribution. There is the contribution we make through rent to your general coffers or whatever category you place that in. And then then it's the broader community, which is a little bit more amorphous. But so our estimated our fiscal year 2025 was $63,100. For the fire relief, we're estimating about $50,000. And we just made one payment in the fourth quarter of this past year, for $10,000. And we try to make donations on a quarterly basis, so for some organization, then we can also keep track of where we are with our revenues, et cetera. Now, our rent this past year was $21,000, so it's considerably higher than it was, and I'll show you. So the year before, our total contributions for charitable contributions were $125,250. The fire relief was $50,000, and our rent was $6,000. So one of the things that changed with ETABS is that we didn't have a bona fide lease. We had kind of a handshake lease with the city. And with ETABS, we had to have a formal lease, which we executed, and they have a formula. And where you are with ETABS, paper tabs, or any other gambling entity or operations. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a sinus infection. And so, but that it maxes out at $1,750 a month. So when I talked to Jeff about the contract, then because we were looking at moving up from $500 a month to $1,000, and then I said, here's what's going to happen with ETABS. You'll max out just based on our revenue. So, so that when I look at kind of the tangible fire relief, the tangible city contribution, and then we can talk about donations too. Just by way of comparison, the year before, our total was $136,223 for our charitable contributions. The fire relief received $70,400, and the rent was $6,000. So it varies a little bit depending on our expenses and some other things that you could certainly see on our tax return, which are public. So I think I'm just going to leave it up to you, Tim, to come up with or talk about the actual donations. But any quick questions, or do you want to hold them till later?
Why don't we have the second presentation, then we'll
Okay.
open up to questions by council.
Thank you. My name is Tim Anderson. I'm a longtime resident of Wayzata. I live at 316 Ridgeview Drive. Been there since 1981. I've been a Lion since approximately 2000. I've been president for probably 4 or 5 years now, and probably about 10 years altogether. But anyway, our club is a small club. We had about 20 members up until about a half a year ago, and luckily, and through some hard work, we have 5 new members. So we're really excited about that, and they're younger members because we are an older club. So there can be some challenging things for us to do physically that we used to do, 20 years ago that we really can't do too much anymore. But Mayor Mullen did touch on some of our kind of boots on the ground volunteer things that we do. We don't want to just be a club that sits back and says, well, we'll just, have the revenue from our lawful gambling come in and we'll just donate it to several different charities. What we try and do, we have a board meeting at the beginning of each month, and our criteria is let's try and donate as much locally in the Wayzata Plymouth area as we can. So pretty much every year we get together and sometimes we get requests for different donations that maybe we haven't the years before, but we do like to give to IOCP, Wayzata Parks and Trails we've given to for when they did some of the new park equipment down at the beach, Boardwalk Senior Housing Apartments, the Retreat Chemical Dependency Facility, the Hammer Residences, the Wayzata Education Fund. We give out 4 $1,000 scholarships to 4 different deserving students at the high school. We do that in May. We have also give to the Wayzata Crime Prevention Coalition, James Day Hill Days, Ridgedale YMCA, the Blue Water Theater just across the street, plus the Wayzata Symphony, the Redeemer Christian Academy, Wayzata Historical Society, and St. Bart's Catholic Church and School, and the Plymouth Civic League, which is, help fund music in Plymouth. That's what we do locally. Might be a couple things I missed, but there's several pages of things that we also give in the Twin Cities area and beyond. And I don't want to stand up here and go through all of them because there's a lot of them. There's like 5 pages of them. So, but we do give to Can't Do Canines. You've heard of them, I'm sure. Courage County Rehabilitation Institute, Paraplegic Program, Damascus Way, which helps people that were incarcerated to come back into society and fit in with trying to find a job and that type of thing. Feed My Starving Children, we've been there several times. We've given them donations, plus we've packed up food. Free bikes for kids, we've helped out with that a couple of times. Hearing Loss Association of America and the Twin Cities chapter, Homeward Bound, Hope Chest for breast cancer, Gift to Juvenile Diabetes Research, Leader Dogs. I could go on and on. We try and do as much that emphasizes sight loss, education on diabetes, hearing loss, that type of thing, because that's kind of what the Lions were founded on. So that's what we try and focus on. We do also give to Second Harvest Heartland and I mentioned Feed My Starving Children. So Special Olympics is another one that's near and dear to our heart, and we help with vision screening when there's sometimes in Stillwater, there's a Special Olympics function going on there, and we help with vision testing for some of those folks that are involved with Special Olympics. So it's a lot of fun, it's rewarding, and it's just our hope that going forward, our desire, and we want to continue being a part of the community and being part of service to the community. And we're always looking for new members, so if anybody's ever interested in finding out more about us, you can visit our website, and hopefully we'll be around for a while, and this has worked out well, and I think it'll work out for quite a few years to come.
Great, thank you for your service. Questions of our friends from the Lions by council? Any questions? Again, thank you so much. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, go ahead if you want to make a comment. Oh, you're asking if we want to join. Anybody would like to opt in? Yeah, no.
And if
Enough.
anybody's interested in the waffle breakfast, this maybe isn't appropriate, but it's at 8:30 to 11:30 at St. Bart's. And you don't have to have a ticket. I do have some tickets on me, but
And it's Saturday, February
we would
22nd.
also use that money for community service and funding some of our projects.
Great.
We also do this vision screening, a free vision screening for kids.
Great.
That's right.
That in there, so.
Yeah, it's called-
Thank you again for your service and for the update tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we're going to have a presentation from the Ernest Asselton American Legion Post 118, which was established in Wayzata just after World War I. Throughout its history, it's been a community gathering place known for dances, picnics, parties. I've had a few parties there, actually, for full disclosure. The Legion is active in our community today, hosting class reunions, as well as making donations to many organizations, including Boy Scouts of America, DARE, Toys for Tots, Gillette's Children's Foundation, and many more. I actually went to a fundraiser up there a few weeks ago for Hope Kids and spent some time with Commander Jerry Ostrov and Club Manager David Lundberg. It's a great place. It's open to the public and welcoming to the public for food and drink, where there are many events like Taco Tuesday, Bingo Night, Meat Raffle, to name a few. I'm actually a member of the American Legion, and I wanted to point this out because I didn't know this until a few weeks ago. Here's my little card. You can be a member of the American Legion even if you haven't served in the armed services. So I entered through the Son of the American Legion. So past active duty military can become members and their descendants. My 90-year-old father, Jim, served in the Army Western Division of North American Air Defense Command Artillery Brigade in Hannaford, Washington in the late 50s, and so I joined on behalf of that. I would like to recognize my colleague, Alex Plekish, for his distinguished service in our armed services, and anyone else here that has served in the armed services. And now I'll turn it over to the city manager to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mayor Mullen. Appreciate that. Yes, I'd like to introduce Kirk Zarbach. He heads gambling at the Legion. This is their first year of heading charitable gambling with pull tabs. So wanted to invite him to not only tell how the year has gone, but also provide more details about all the great stuff they do in our community as well.
Kirk Zarbach, 1310 Holdridge Terrace. And I've been here since 1984. And I love the way you introduce it. I don't have to do much. It's very good. So we got gambling as far as pull tabs okayed here last year about this time. And we started on March 5th. And to give you an idea how it's gone, and again, Nancy mentioned the fiscal year. It's from July to the following June. And our fiscal year for the Wayzata Legion is May, well, it'd be June through May. So when we received the okay to have pull tabs, our 12-month period, our gross revenue was $372,000. Now we go to the year we're at right now, the 7 months, we have $382,000. That's 7 months. So in not much more than half the time, we've made more money gross. And those numbers are goofy because that $382,000, we have $58,000 in reserve where we had no reserve before. So we're making now about triple what we were before. Like Nancy was saying, the numbers are goofy, the taxes are goofy. So I said, well, let's make this simple. And I took the last 3 months and I'll tell you what we did gross. I'll tell you what we did net. And what we did is average a month now, we're doing $221,000 a month gross. We're netting $37,260. Now that net gets taxed, and then your expenses come out. So we're doing a heck of a lot more than we did before. And we donated in 23, which would be midway 23 through 24, we donated $58,500. And we had a 5-star rating, and we were the 6th best donating for expenses. We were at 78.5% was donated. So we're doing really well back then, but now with these, we did 66,500 by the end of this last year. In the 7th-month period, we did more than we did the year before, and we still have $100,000 in the bank. We gave the state or the city $20,000 in January. So that pretty much was for the first partial year we had. So the overview is we're doing really well.
What was the purpose of the 20,000? What did we use it for?
To the city?
Fire equipment, essentially.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we just, we were going to give money to the city and like, hey, good neighbors, and we just want to make sure everyone's doing well. As far as where we donate the money, the local and national that is really low overhead management is who we donate it to. Our major is to the veterans though. So our veterans, we are donating a little more than half to the veterans. And now we have some money there that we can actually take, because we have till May to figure out where we want to really concentrate our donations. Because we already donated more this year than we did last year. So that's going very well. Just trying to cover the questions on here. As far as the locally, we have baseball, the Legion Baseball, Plymouth Wayzata Baseball. We give them money. Crime Relief Association, or the Crime Relief, we definitely give money to. And there's quite a few different ones like you had mentioned earlier. And I know I just got a call today from the guy that heads up the State Legion softball. Wants to get me involved, or our club involved with donating to the Wayzata Plymouth Fast Pitch Softball. And I said, you give him my number. We'll be more than happy to do it. So I guess overall, we're very pleased. I hope the city's pleased. The Lions, we have always appreciated you, and I think it's done good for both of us. I really do. The one thing that's interesting, and of our gambling, of that $37,000 a month or so that we are getting net, 17,000 of that's electronic gambling on our end. It's probably changed on your end. And our bingo program, which I think is as good as anyone around, we're still at about 22 to 23% of our overall. And then we do have the meat raffle and stuff, and that's why we had about 25% between what we used to do. So I thank everyone for letting us have the opportunity, and we're going to donate as much we can locally and to foundations that don't have huge administrative costs. That's what we're looking at.
Thank you. Any questions by council of our friends at the Legion? Go ahead.
This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment or observation, kind of straddling both of the two organizations. I think one of the concerns we had when we were debating this was that there would be some cannibalization between the two. Real concern, probably more for you, because you didn't have anything yet. But from listening to both, it looks like not only did it not cannibalize, it seems like it reinforced each other. That's a tremendous result that you just talked about, and I'm pleasantly surprised about that. And the bottom line is I think the community has benefited from that. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Any other comments? No, just again, thank you to the Lions and the Legion for your extraordinary community support and for managing charitable gambling in a way that benefits both the city of Wayzata and other local charities. So thank you very much. So City Manager, do we have anyone on Teams that wanted to comment in this section?
Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Okay, next is new agenda items. Does anyone have any new agenda items to bring up? Anyone? Okay, so now we're going to go to our new business. There was no new business, but we did pull an item. So now we're going to have a presentation and discussion of what was formerly approval of the amendment to the 2025 legislative priorities. And so we are going to now have a presentation and discussion about that.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Happy to answer any questions that Councilmember Plekish or anybody else has off the bat. I don't have a presentation prepared for this, but just to summarize, I think I'd be happy to provide a summary of this agenda item. Ultimately, the amendment to the 2025 legislative priorities was put on this agenda because in the first meeting in January, we approved the original legislative priorities for this coming year. At a subsequent workshop in late January, the council discussed additional information that we received just based on how the legislative session was going from our lobbyists. And we felt that in order to give the city the best opportunity to pursue additional sales taxes to benefit the community, from the legislature that we not only advocate for the opportunity to utilize food and beverage, but also local option sales tax as well, which is a broader sales tax. All of this is, to meet our overall objective to diversify our revenue to offset property taxes onto our residents. And pursuing both of those avenues will give us greater flexibility as we move down the road. Right now, there is a moratorium on all sales taxes, so nothing's going to happen until the legislature decides to lift that moratorium, which will not likely happen until at least May. So we can still pursue this. We can still get ready if they do lift it, but we won't have any action from the legislative side until May or June. And then ultimately, a resolution would need to be approved with more detail, kind of highlighting what the city's really advocating for, specifically. So happy to answer any questions. This is just an amended legislative priority sheet that the council should put their stamp on it.
So I just have a couple other context comments, and then we'll turn it over to Councilmember Plekish, who wanted to have a discussion about this. But again, it was on our agenda and approved at the first meeting of the year. We subsequently received feedback not only from our lobbyists, but from Senator Johnson and Representative Acom, that the legislature was having trouble determining their path forward on whether or not they were going to allow food and beverage or a local area sales tax. So both are not allowed at this point. So the advice from our lobbyist and from Senator Johnson and Representative Acom was there's no way to move forward currently. So the options that might happen at the Capitol is they'll change the existing legislation. They'll go back to what was on the books previously and lift the moratorium, or they may remain on hold. And so the feedback we received was we'd be in a better position to advocate for both food and beverage and a local area sales tax. We discussed that in workshop at our first meeting in February and had a discussion and discernment process that agreed to move forward. It was then put on the agenda tonight. And now we're going to have a conversation about it at the meeting. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Plekish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So predating this council, we actually debated this quite extensively last year. And one of the things that we considered was it's not a local area sales tax, it's a local option sales tax. There's a distinction there. We decided at that time that we did not want to do a local option sales tax, that we would go with a food and beverage sales tax because fewer of the Wayzata residents would be impacted by that versus the other where many more Wayzata residents would be impacted. I wanted to pull this because, number one, to talk about the history of this, but what we're doing here is we're authorizing focus for our lobbyists, which do good things for us. But I am opposed to the local option sales tax. I am opposed to it in theory. If it came back to us as an option, I would be opposed to it at that time. I'm not in favor of raising taxes on our residents to the extent that this would do it. So it almost doesn't matter to me whether we get this or not. I would be opposed to it if it came back to us. So I wanted to pull this to put it on record that I oppose this. I'm not opposed to any other legislative priorities, but this particular one in here I am opposed to. So I'm going to vote against this unless we can pull it and go forward with just the food and beverage tax. Happy to take other comments.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Councilmember Plekish. Would anyone else like to make comments on this as it is in our packet to move forward with this?
If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I would too. Similarly to Councilmember Plekish, I too support the food and beverage sales tax over the local option sales tax. To me, it's a burden more so on our residents, but also I think would impact some of the local businesses. And I'm very concerned about the community's desire to have a thriving commercial core. So without enough information on how it would impact residents and local businesses, I too do not support a local option sales tax and will vote against it.
Okay, comments from others? Councilmember Parkhill.
Yeah, I'd like to say that having this as a legislative agenda item, it only means that it gives us options, that we can choose whether we want to in the future to have a local area, local option sales tax or a food and beverage tax or none of it. But we just need to make sure that we're ahead of the game by communicating well in advance. When this comes around and, you know, the state gets their act together and decides that we do have choices here, we need to be prepared and be able to react to them. So that's what we're doing now, is saying, go for it, let's see what we can get. And then once we determine that, we'll be ahead of the game by having had communications with our businesses, with our constituents. And I think that's a really important step so that we're not caught on our heels again.
Okay, other comments?
Yeah, I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It came up quick, and we made the decisions we did to move it ahead with these priorities. As I thought about it more, though, I'm in agreement with the priorities we've outlined here, but I think the food and beverage tax is much more consistent with what the conversations we've had in the community about making sure that taxes that we enact, new taxes we enact, do the best job we can about having visitors pay for those services. And I think the fact that it offers more flexibility, it doesn't require a referendum. At this point, I'm comfortable supporting this if we would exclude the local sales tax or the local option.
Okay, so I have a couple comments. So much like Councilmember Parkhill, this is nothing more than just preserving our flexibility. And I think for context, our local businesses are burdened heavily by property taxes. If you talk to our retailers, they pay a significant amount of their rent in tax, whether you're a restaurant, whether you're Walgreens, whether you're whoever. And it's not sustainable to continue to pound property tax, which directly takes profit out of those businesses. And I have personally spoken to at least 15 local business owners since we began this journey in January. Not one of them, after they heard what we planned on spending the money on, public safety and parks, resisted it. They're not crazy about it. They a tax is a tax. 0.5% on a $100 ticket is 50 cents. So it gins up potentially between $400,000 and $800,000, depending if it's food and beverage or local option sales tax. And to be really clear, we have no option right now to proceed with anything. So today, we can't even do a food and beverage tax. And so I don't see any reason to limit ourselves to have options to explore at the Capitol. Second part of what we learned from the last few years is when we didn't robustly engage the business community and they didn't understand it, they got upset and they contacted their lobbyists and began to block us at the Capitol. So part of this plan when we approved it in January was to have robust community engagement, to walk it out and discuss in detail every option with the local business community, explain why we were going to pursue both options so that we could walk through either door if it was presented to us. So I would support as presented what we adjusted based on our State House representative, our Senate representative, and our lobbyist, that this puts us in the best position. Furthermore, if you look at our operating expenses over the last 4 years, they've been up by close to $2 million. And so we're spending more, we're jamming more on our residents, we're jamming more on our local businesses in property tax, which is 70% of our take to our general fund. So under the strategic plan approved years ago and affirmed again, we said we were going to pursue alternative revenue sources, and this fits very nicely in it. And I don't see the point, and I actually don't agree in any way, that it somehow is better for the residents to have only food and beverage. I understand that the sales tax data that was presented to us had ranges of numbers estimating the number of local people that went to restaurants versus stores. To me, that's a moot point. At 0.5%, we are not talking about a meaningful number to the ticket. And it is unsustainable. We talk again and again and again about how we want retail here, how we want to make retail successful. What can we do to make retail successful? What we can do is reduce the burden of property tax and achieve that revenue in a different way and The last comment I'll make is we don't have a sustainable funding source for public safety in our capital plan to either rehabilitate or build a new police station in the future in a long ball. We don't have an ongoing funding source for our park and trails program. If we move forward later this year with spending over $2 million on Clappage Park, we completely drain the entire parks fund, and we don't have a sustainable funding source for parks. So if you elevate the conversation up a level to say, why are we exploring it? The drivers are being wholly dependent on property for commercial and residential is not sustainable. Number two, we don't have a ongoing funding source. We'd have to raise the levy to do a police station. We'd have to raise the levy potentially to fund our parks better. So this is just an option, and I would strongly support at least advocating for it and choosing to walk through the door if it is presented to us. So I want to go on record saying I'm supportive of this, and we don't have the ability to move forward with the food and beverage tax. So we can talk about these hypotheticals that food and beverage is preferred. We can't do food and beverage today of any way. So that's why I'm supportive of doing it. And so I guess I would offer any other questions or comments of staff, and I think we'll then have a discussion on how we might approach this.
Well, I'd like to weigh in again. Just because we can do this doesn't mean we should. And just because we can raise taxes doesn't mean that we should. And
Doesn't say we're gonna
I
raise
am
taxes.
philosophically opposed to this. I would offer a motion that we pass this forward without that piece. Because just like the argument that I made about cannabis, where I voted against every opportunity, spending money, the city's money, on a study to say what it would mean to the city to get in the business of cannabis, I personally didn't care how much it said we shouldn't be in the business. So I voted against all the money we spent there because no matter what they came up with, I would vote against it.
As did every one of your colleagues.
The council overrode me on that, and eventually we did toss it out, okay? This was debated in quite extensively last year, 100 times more than we have this year, okay? We talked about this in great detail, and at that time, the council was opposed to this idea. I'm opposed to it tonight, and based on what I've heard of my colleagues tonight, I think we have a 3-2 vote against this one particular piece. So, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we pass this legislative priority without that one piece and have just the rest of it. So that would be my motion.
Okay, before we move forward to a motion, I think we have to provide some more context to exactly what we're passing, because the second part of that, I just want to clarify, is that we have an engagement plan. So depending on how we decide on whether or not a local option is included or not, the second part of what's in our packet, I just want to clarify that we have an engagement plan. And so no matter what we decide to pursue, and we'll have your vote and we'll go through it, the second part of it is, are we okay with the engagement plan? So I just want to make sure that we discuss that first, and then we can have a motion about the package together, and then you can make that motion. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, but I'll make the point that the engagement plan doesn't change one iota with this.
Well, right,
It's
but
exactly the same.
So again,
So it's a moot point.
well, I guess since we're having this discussion in public, I just want to go on record as saying, no matter where we land, we're going to engage the local business community. We have a very specific plan by month on how to do that. And that's all I wanted to clarify and make sure it was known. And our stated use is, even if it's just food and beverage, is police and parks. So I just want to make sure that's on the record. Are we all okay with that in the total package? And then let's go through a vote on it. So any comments on engagement and purpose?
Well, I think the engagement plan was in our workshop packet and not in this packet
Well, it is now
tonight.
because we pulled it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember McDonald, the engagement plan wasn't an official part of the agenda item on the consent agenda for what we're talking about.
Okay.
It's incorporated in whatever direction we pursue. We'll follow the engagement plan that we discussed tonight, earlier this evening.
And Manager Dahl, could you remind us what we were going to, like when we passed or when we approved our legislative priorities for the food and beverage, what we stated those funds would be used towards in January or last year even?
Just generally, they'd be used for both operations and capital costs of both parks and public safety.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure too, because in theory, you know, I think I should look at operations, and it was my understanding that it went towards streets, roads,
Streets as well, yeah.
that sort of thing.
Right there,
It's-
yep.
it's right there.
Yeah, and be clear, what happened last year is irrelevant to this conversation. What is relevant to this conversation is what we passed in January. So yes, we can talk about it for context, but we're not walking back something that wasn't on the agenda for what we approved in January.
I just wanted to clarify what the money for a food and beverage sales tax would go towards before I voted on it.
Perfect. Do you have that clarification?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to mention, because of the original approval back early January, it approved the legislative priorities that we've all talked about, and not the local option sales tax. So if that's the direction that the council ultimately goes, we don't have to change anything, because that's already approved. I would say the motion appropriate tonight would be to consider the updated or the amended legislative priorities and seeing if that passes or not.
So if I may ask, so just to be clear, if we vote this down tonight, as it is, we still have legislative priorities that include everything except this one thing.
Correct.
And we don't have to approve that separately because we already did that.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think, any further questions or comments?
Well, just to further clarify what I think I heard, the engagement plan, I'm in favor of the engagement plan. If staff needs to modify that in any way based on the vote tonight, I think it would be appropriate. And then use of funds for parks and public safety and operations, as we've talked about, identified. My understanding is we would use it for any or all of those.
Yes, there's more flexibility with food and beverage. The amount total generated is less, but there's more flexibility.
Okay, so the only variable we're talking about is, in the discussion, is if we approve both for the local option and the beverage and sales, or just one or the other.
Correct.
Okay,
Well, not one or the other, just food and beverage.
just food and beverage.
Right, and just one last clarification, just one for the record to be clear. The legislature could not allow us to do food and beverage. The legislature could go back and radically adjust how food and beverage is done. The legislature could completely re-engineer the local area sales tax. So just want to make sure that we're clear with the public. I know we're clear up here. What we're saying is, the only thing that we'll walk through the door on is if the legislature restores the previous food and beverage tax or changes the rules for the food and beverage tax, and then that's what we're asking for. So just, that's for clarification. Great. So I guess, go ahead, Jeff.
So in about a month, we're going to have a conversation about the needs for a new public safety building. I haven't seen the need for that. I feel like it's premature to shoot this down because before we know if we need that building or not. And if we know we need that building and we have the discussion, then we don't have to vote on doing a tax now. This just gives us the option to be able to do it if we deem it necessary. I am not excited about a local options sales tax. I am not excited about tax at all. But it may be a means to an end that we need. So I don't understand why we're shooting ourselves in the foot by getting rid of this option. And I realize Alex doesn't want to tax at all, but we may need to pay for a new public safety building. I don't have all the facts, but I just feel like, why not include this? And if we want to stop this legislation at some point, we certainly can. If we deem that we don't need a public safety building, we don't want to rehab the one that the police department that we have, but something needs to be done on that side, apparently. And this is one of the ways to do it, is to have a local option sales tax that is approved by the entire community with a referendum. And the money would directly go to X, Y, and Z. And I don't see why we're taking that option away from each other.
Councilmember Parkhill, may I just offer you a flip side reasoning is, well, there's a couple things, but one is we don't know what our needs are yet. So to me, it feels inappropriate to ask for something before you know you even need it. And risking people's livelihoods in a business feels like a big risk. You know, the mayor mentioned, what is 5% of $100?
0.5%.
Pardon me, thank you. 0.5% of $100. Well, you can't survive in Wayzata with $100 tickets. That's a comparison I think isn't right on the scale, because $100, that's why we can't have coffee shops in Wayzata. It's because we need to generate a certain amount of revenue. We need to sell big ticket items in order to pay the rent and have this thriving commercial core on Lake Street. And if you can't sell those big ticket items because your customers are gonna say, well, I can do it online or over here, and avoid that sales tax. So I think this isn't thought out enough. I don't know what the needs are, and I don't know what the risks are to the business. And that's why I'm not gonna vote for it.
Any other comments?
I'll weigh in too, since the subject of a public safety facility came up, which isn't part of our agenda tonight, but since it came up, the numbers that we saw during the workshop were so large, and I won't say what they were, but to have a new facility was so incredibly large that even if we had the sales tax, it would only make a small dent in it. That wouldn't be the solution to it in any case. We'd have to come up with some other financing, so to me, that's irrelevant in this discussion. I'm going to withdraw my motion that I tried to make because it's a moot point. If we vote this down, then essentially it reverts back to the same thing I was trying to accomplish in the first place, which is to advance our agenda as we had voted in before. The only difference here is the local option sales tax, which I'm opposed, and apparently two of my colleagues here are opposed to as well. So I will withdraw that motion. We can just vote on the agenda item as it is.
Yep, so I have one last comment. So if you look at what commercial pays in their rent for property tax in this town, it ranges from anywhere from $13 to past $20 per square foot, which is more detrimental to the P&L of a business than any 0.5% at $100, $500, $1,000, $10,000. And this previous administration raised our operating budget by $2 million, raised the levy on average more than 10% the last 4 years. So this body voted to raise taxes and put burden on our residents and our businesses in the form of property tax connected to the levy. I'm with Councilman Perkle. I understand you want to have the vote, but I think it merits a robust debate in public to understand why some of us are for it and why some of us are against this. It is not sustainable, in my view, to continue to pound on our property taxes the sole way it impacts the cost of it. You want to know why there's no coffee shop? No coffee shop can pay the tax that's embedded in a rent to operate here. Why do we have struggle to get occupancy in retail? The number one lever is the tax burden as part of rent. And if you want to study that, go look at what you pay in tax in downtown Minneapolis. It's half or a third of what you take here in Cary. So yes, I understand you want to push this, Alex, and we will do that. But it merits a complete context and understanding. It's not just about what we talked about. Every resident in this city is suffering from extremely high property taxes. And every time we increase the levy, we increase the burden on the commercial and residential district. And it's not sustainable. And so with that, we'll then proceed and decide what we're going to vote on and move on.
In the spirit of a good conversation and another perspective, how you expect a store owner or a retail owner to have that conversation with a customer right in front of you and try to explain that you're moving the burden onto you, the customer, so that I can have lower rent and maybe charge. It's a little too nuanced, I think. And even if you're making the rents technically lower, or that's your goal is to make the rents, you're still going to make the price higher. And that's what the customer is going to see, and that's what the customer is going to avoid.
Sure, just last comment. I operate a business in Excelsior where they have a 0.5% sales tax. They've had it for each of the last 5 years that I've operated in Excelsior. I have never once had a comment from a guest. I've never seen it in a survey. I've never seen it anywhere at a 0.5%.
What is your average ticket?
My average ticket is $64.
Exactly.
Yeah, so an average restaurant ticket is 100. So, I mean, again, we've had the conversation. We will continue to have the conversation in our community engagement. And then now I would suggest that we do as Councilmember Plekish suggested, and I want to restate what I think you said. You're withdrawing your first motion that we did a lot of discussion on, and you're saying that we would like to just put it to a vote, and if the vote holds as no, we would just fall back to our position from January. I just want to make sure that I understand and that your intent is properly stated.
That's correct, and that essentially accomplishes what my first motion was in the first place.
Okay, so any further questions or comments?
Okay, just so we understand, if we vote this down, then don't we need to take another vote, maybe without the local option sales tax, to approve this legislative agenda?
Councilmember Sorensen, we do not, because those have already been approved. So this is really just adding.
Oh, because this
the local
added it. If we don't approve it, it goes back to where it was.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
David, any comments?
No, Mayor, I'd just say procedurally, you could ask for a motion to approve the amendment to the 2025 legislative priorities, and if that motion is seconded and it fails on the vote, we would fall back on that January 2025 version, which just didn't have the amendment.
Okay, are we okay with that? Alex, are you okay with that? Okay, so let's go ahead and we would entertain a motion, Councilmember Plekish. Or anyone else that would like to make the motion.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to pass this legislative priority, letter I, to add the local option sales tax to our legislative priorities.
We have a move. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Further discussion? So then let's just do a roll call vote since we've had very robust conversation on this. So again, what we're voting on is saying that as was pulled from the consent agenda to the main agenda, the motion in seconded is to approve an amended legislative priorities. So that's the motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded. Further conversation? Let's do a roll call vote. If you could call the vote, Manager Dahl.
Councilmember Parkhill?
Aye.
Councilmember Plekish?
Nay.
Councilmember McDonald?
Nay.
Councilmember Sorensen?
Nay.
Mayor Mullen?
Okay, so that does not pass, so we just fall back to January, and we will walk forward with our community engagement plan as suggested, and was in our workshop packet. And thank you, everyone, for your robust debate. I'm glad that we had that debate. I think it was very helpful, Alex, to have it in public, so thank you for pulling it. Okay, next I think we have city manager support. report.
Yeah, real briefly, Mr. Mayor and Council, two things want to note. Next week on Tuesday, February 25th, it'll be our State of the Cities address with Mr. Mayor, Mayor Mullen, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Kind of networking, refreshments, 4:30 to 5, presentation, 5-ish to 5:30, and then Q&A until 6. So we encourage everybody to come. Everybody's welcome. It'll be short, sweet, and a lot of good camaraderie. Come see your neighbors and learn everything that we've accomplished and what we're working on for the next year.
And I sure hope that some council members are able to join as well.
So we have that to look forward to next week. And then on March 10th, which is a Monday, Mayor Mullen will be continuing his Muni meetups from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Muni. Sounds like for the first one, we had a pretty good reception. So everybody's welcome, and see you there.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there anything else that council would like to ask of city manager? Okay, with that, I would accept a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.